His fingers paused halfway down the single itemized receipt, stopping at the line for the new 7-iron. The price was paid weeks ago, but what caught his attention wasn't the total. It was the tiny set of numbers stamped next to the club name, the Loft, printed as a single digit that dictated how high that ball would launch, how far it would carry, how the entire round would feel. Nobody mentioned that number when he bought it. Nobody mentioned it because that number was working against him before he ever reached the first tee. Here's the part. Nobody tells the senior golfer the Loft on your iron was chosen for someone else. Somewhere in that pro shop, that 7-iron was designed around a 30-year-old swing that generates enough speed to launch a ball into the sky with almost no help. And you paid full price for a club built for a body you don't have anymore. The pro shop glowed with polished wood and glass cases, every wall whispering that the equipment on display would fix what ails your game. Behind the counter, a cash register drawer closed with a clean, practiced click. The sound of another transaction built on a promise that the right gear would finally deliver. You walked out of that shop believing the distance was in the club head. The system wants you to believe that, because belief keeps the money flowing. But the distance was never in the head. It was in that one printed number, the Loft, the angle that dictates launch, and it was set wrong for you. The evidence sits in 4 mistakes that repeat every single season, costing you yards off the tee and dollars off your wallet. And the first, the one that starts the whole quiet drain, is the club you already trust the most. If you've ever stood over a 7-iron, felt the solid strike, watched the ball climb, then watched it fall short and right, into the bunker that should never have been in play, you know that dull confusion that settles in your chest. It wasn't a bad swing. It felt pure. The shot flew low and died, and you walked off thinking your timing was off. Your hips turned early. Your hands got lazy. You blamed yourself because that's what the system teaches you to do. But the truth sat there the whole time, hidden in the angle of the club face. That standard Loft was engineered for a swing speed you measured 10 years ago. Buying it off the rack means you bought a machine calibrated for someone else's engine. And every round you play with it, you're paying for that mismatch with your score and your confidence. That quiet confusion you felt after the strike, flush, then short and right, was never about your swing. It was the Loft, set to a standard that belonged to someone else. Subscribe now so you never miss another revelation that puts the truth behind the scorecard. Comment below with the words "dead money." Everything we expose on this channel is in the Dead Money Golf ebook. 120 pages, $47. Link below. And then tell us, the last time you flushed a 7-iron and watched it die, did you blame yourself or the club? Now consider this. There's a reason the golf industry fills racks with those same strong Lofts season after season, and it has nothing to do with helping you play better. It's about moving product. The numbers get stamped based on what the marketing department believes the average buyer wants, and what the average buyer wants is what the tour pros use. That forged blade with the de-lofted face looks exactly like what the broadcast shows on Sunday. The gap between what you paid and what you got is the contradiction that fuels this entire machine. That's mistake number 1, and it's the most expensive one you'll make this year. You buy the strong standard Loft, you lose height and distance, you think the club is worn out, and you replace it with the next one that promises more yards. The loop closes perfectly with your wallet on the losing side. There's a second mistake hiding right behind the first one, and this one is quieter because it compounds over time. It's the decision to cling to those old specs even as your swing changes, refusing to adjust the Lofts when the evidence is already on the course. Think about the last time you got fitted for a new driver. How the fitter bent over the numbers, checked your launch angle, adjusted the hosel to squeeze out every possible yard. Then, remember when you last did that for your irons. You didn't, because nobody told you it was an option. Those 7 clubs in your bag, the ones you hit more than anything else, they're playing with settings that betray you more every season. Your swing speed drops gradually, maybe without you noticing, and the already strong Loft gets stronger relative to what your body can deliver. The launch gets lower, the landing gets shorter, and you reach for the club one down because the ball won't climb. Open your bag, and that quiet doubt curls up when you look at the lofts. If you've ever pulled your pitching wedge from the bag for a shot inside 100 yards, watched it skid across the green instead of biting, and felt that small internal shrug, that was the loft turning against you. The same wedge you've trusted for years now launches lower because your speed isn't what it was when you bought it. You adjust, you swing harder, you manipulate your hands to save the shot, and every manipulation costs you consistency. Then the inevitable happens. You blame the clubs. You buy a new set, maybe a more expensive set, hoping the design changed something. It didn't. The problem was never the model. It was the refusal to adjust the angles your body actually needs, and every year that delay adds another layer to the pile of wasted greens fees. The third mistake is the one that hides in the turf, and it's the one most golfers never even know exists until they watch a slow-motion replay of their own swing. It's the sole width and the bounce, the geometry of the club's bottom edge, the part that drags through the grass before it ever touches the ball. On a modern game improvement iron, the bounce is engineered to help a faster swing glide through the turf without digging too deep. That design assumes your swing still generates the same speed and attack angle it did at 35. For a senior player, speed drops and the swing shallows out. The club bottoms out earlier, the leading edge digs into the ground, and the ball comes out thin and weak, skipping along the fairway with none of the spin that carries it toward the pin. You feel the impact shudder up your arms, that dull clank that says the hit was all wrong. The divot is a foot deep and pointing left, and your ball sits 50 yards short of where your playing partners landed. You mutter about a bad lie, but the lie was never the problem. The bounce was miscalculated for the speed you bring. That dull clank is the sound of money you won't get back. Subscribe, and you'll start to see how many of those hidden costs the industry has already built into your bag. Right Dead Money. Everything we expose on this channel is in the Dead Money Golf ebook. 120 pages, 40 savitemondas. Link below. In the comments if you've ever felt that shudder and known before anyone said a word that the club was never right for your speed. Every one of those fat shots and thin strikes carries a price tag that compounds across the season. A bucket of range balls to fix your swing, a lesson with a pro who tells you to change your tempo, a new wedge you buy, hoping the added spin will save you. None of them address the real issue sitting in the soul of the club. That's what makes this mistake so expensive. It disguises itself as a swing flaw, and every swing flaw has a cure that costs money. You pay for the cure, the flaw doesn't go away, and you pay again. The system profits twice from the same broken geometry, and because the cause is invisible to almost every amateur, it repeats every season without anyone ever pointing at the one number that needs to change. Remember that first mistake, the standard loft built for a faster swing? Here's where it comes back to bite you hardest. Combine that wrong launch angle with the wrong bounce and the wrong sole width, and you've built a perfect storm of mishits that you will spend all season trying to outswing. You buy a heavier shaft to stabilize your hands. You buy a softer ball to get more spin. You buy training aids that promise to shallow your attack angle. Each purchase makes sense on its own. Each one is sold as the missing piece. But the real piece was never missing. It was just pressing the wrong numbers against the ball. The industry banks on the fact that you won't check the loft, because checking the loft is free. It takes 5 minutes at a fitting cart, and free solutions don't generate revenue. That's the forgotten principle behind every single season of wasted yards. Now the fourth mistake arrives, and this one is the most counterintuitive of them all. It's the belief that custom fitting is too expensive, a luxury reserved for tour players and people with money to burn. This is the mistake that quietly costs the most, because it convinces you to keep playing wrong clubs forever rather than spend a few dollars to make them right. You've heard the price of a professional fitting session and swallowed hard. You've told yourself the standard set is good enough, that you're not good enough to need the extra help. That self-deprecation is exactly what the industry counts on. In reality, a fitting session costs about as much as one good round of golf at a nice course, or a couple of premium sleeves of balls. And it fixes all 4 mistakes at once. The fitter bends your lofts weaker, adjusts the bounce, changes the sole contact, and suddenly the ball launches higher with the same swing. The financial truth cuts the other way. Playing wrong lofts for a season costs you more in lost balls, extra strokes, and pointless replacement clubs than the fitting ever will. Let that settle for a moment, because it runs against everything the marketing tells you. The gear aisle wants you to believe that performance comes from buying new. The fitting cart wants you to believe that performance comes from adjusting what you have. One of those options is a one-time cost that extends the life of your bag for years. The other is a revolving door of purchases that never actually solves the problem. When you calculate the total drain across the season, the range tokens, the extra sleeves of balls after the miss hits, the greens fees on days you played worse than you should have, the standard lofts have already cost you several times over what the fitting would have charged. This is the system's quietest leak, and it's the one nobody talks about because the fix is too cheap to sell. The picture comes into focus now, and it's not a pretty one. All four mistakes: the standard strong loft, the refusal to adjust as your speed declines, the wrong bounce that ruins turf interaction, and the belief that fitting is too expensive. They're not separate problems. They're one engineered system. The industry manufactures a default setting that penalizes the senior golfer just enough to keep the purchases flowing without making the game so frustrating that you quit entirely. You're kept at the edge of good enough. You shoot a 90 instead of an 85. You buy a new club every season, hoping something finally clicks. And each year, the calculator totals a sum you never asked for. That's not your failure. That's the architecture of the market you're playing inside. The system is counting on you never adding up those quiet leaks. That calculator total they don't want you to see. That's the dead money this channel exists to expose. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next time the industry leaves a door open for you to walk through. I want you to write dead money in the comments. Dead money. Everything we expose on this channel is in the Dead Money Golf ebook. 120 pages, $47. Link below. If you've ever felt your equipment was bleeding your score and your wallet at the same time. So where does that leave you, standing in the pro shop with the shiny new iron in your hands? It leaves you with an unfair advantage you never knew existed. You now know the four mistakes are all pointing at the same fix. When you walk into that fitting bay, you're not there to be sold a set of premium clubs. You're there to correct the angles the industry got wrong for you at the factory. You ask the fitter to weaken the lofts, to add bounce where your turf contact needs it, to match the sole width to the speed you actually bring to the swing. And you watch the launch monitor do something you've never seen from your own clubs. The ball climbing, like it wants to fly, not skidding along the ground like it's afraid of the sky. The sound changes too. A clean, solid click instead of that dull, thin clank that has haunted your rounds for years. You step up to the first tee that next weekend, the 7-iron warm in your hands, and you don't feel the usual tension creeping up your neck. You set up over the ball with a quiet confidence that has nothing to do with a new purchase. The swing feels the same as it always has, but the ball launches higher, hangs in the air longer, and lands softer on the green, stopping 6 feet from the pin instead of rolling off the back edge. Your playing partner asks what you changed. You could tell them it's a new club. It's not. It's the same club you've had for years, just finally set up for the swing you actually own. And when you hand them the receipt from the fitting session, the one that cost less than the box of balls they bought last week, you'll see the look on their face. That's the moment you know you're not the one being fooled anymore. These 4 mistakes have cost senior golfers thousands of yards and thousands of dollars over the years. All of it laundered through the belief that the problem was the swing, the hands, the age, the body. None of that was ever the real culprit. The culprit was a set of angles stamped at a factory and sold as universal truth. The fix was always sitting in that fitting bay, quiet and cheap, waiting for someone to stop blaming themselves and start asking the right question. Now you know the question, and you know the 4 mistakes behind it. The next time you walk through those pro shop doors, you're not walking in as a customer. You're walking in as the person who read the fine print. And the system, for once, is the one that's been played.